Hello, everyone. Welcome to the webinar. I'm Lauren Montano. I'm a project assistant, and I'll be hosting this event. Before we begin, for those who may not know, Redwind is a nonprofit organization that provides tribal technical assistance on a variety of programs, including but not limited to HHS, CY, and elder abuse. This ranges from policy review via email to site visits. If you are interested, you can contact me at lauren@redwind.net. You can also visit our website at redwind.net for additional information on services we provide, upcoming events and resources, such as handouts and guidebooks that you can download. As this states, this project is supported by grant number 2017 TAAX-K023. Sorry, guys. Awarded to the Office of Violence Against Women, U.S. Department of Justice. The opinions, findings, conclusions, and recommendations expressed in this publication, program, exhibition are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the views of the U.S. Department of Justice. This webinar is part of our Children and Youth Project. Presenting with us today, we have Cristina Rivera-Carpenter, Kim Key, Amanda Williams, Kellie Begaye, Charnielle, Desiderio. I hope I said that correctly. This event has captioning, which you'll need to manually turn on from the menu. If you have questions or comments, you can put them in the chat or the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and you can click the hand icon. You'll all be muted, so if we see the hand, we can then unmute you so that you can ask your questions verbally. I'll now turn it over to Cristina Rivera-Carpenter.
Good afternoon, everyone. Excuse my voice today. Thank you for joining us this afternoon. I'm excited to present Positive Indigenous Parenting along with the Navajo Nation Project iLaunch team. If we could go to the first slide, please. All right, so we wanted to start our presentation with introduction. So I'll begin and then I'll hand over to Kim. So again, my name is Cristina Rivera-Carpenter. I am mestiza on my maternal side. My grandmothers are Lipan Apache and Indigenous from the Mexican state of San Luis Potosi. On my paternal side, my grandmothers are German and Scots-Irish. That's who I am as an Indigenous woman. And I have been a guest here in Navajo Nation for the past 13 years since I moved from South Dakota. For my full-time job, I work with the University of California, San Francisco with their HEAL initiative. And I'm glad to be a parent partner with Navajo Nation Project iLaunch, as well as a professor, adjunct professor at the University of Arizona and Regis University. But I think the most important thing that brings me here today is I am a parent of 5. My oldest daughter is 21. My youngest daughter is 19 months, and I have 3 sons in between. And so I'm someone that was a teen parent. I'm a single parent. And so a lot of the things that we're going to be talking about today, kind of learning just through my experience of being a parent over the last 20 years. So thank you, and I'll hand over to Kim.
Thank you, Cristina. Can we go to the next slide, please? Hello, everyone. My name is Kimberly Key. I go by Kim for short. My clans are Nakaidine, Nishlan, Tudichini, Bashishchin, Sanjakina, Dashache, Kiani, Dashanella. That's how I introduce myself in my native language. But in short, in English, I am the Mexican People Clan, born for the Bitterwater Clan. And I'm from a small community called Clagato, Arizona. And some of my hobbies and interests include, I say seasonal running because I don't like running during the winter, only during the warmer months, hiking, listening to podcasts, baking, reading, and spending time with my family. Family has been a huge impact in my life, and they continue to be my support system. And with that, in my professional experience, I carried that on to my experience in working with families over the past 6 years in different roles, including home visiting, doing the United States Peace Corps, and then also now working with Project Indigenous Launch. And to talk more about what Navajo Project iLaunch is, the The I in iLaunch stands for Indigenous, so it reads Navajo Project Indigenous Launch, and launch stands for Linking Actions for Unmet Needs in Children's Health. It is a grant administered by the Department of Genet Education, Office of Special Education and Rehabilitation Services, and it promotes and supports the importance of early childhood, ages 0 to 8 and their families in the social emotional development and whole child wellness through education, training, outreach, prevention strategies. And it also has specific program goals to build a coordinated and sustainable early childhood system on the Navajo Nation and support Navajo families and children beyond the Navajo Nation borders. And in my role in Project Launch, I'm the program coordinator, and I'm going to introduce the rest of our team, or have them introduce themselves, and I'm going to pass it off to Amanda.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Amanda Williams. Chishidina and Nishla, Bipidoni, Bushishchin, Kilachini, Dushache, Auto Tutnazana, Dashanala. I am San Carlos Apache and Navajo, and I live in Saley, Arizona. And my role in Navajo Project iLaunch is I am the developmental specialist. So I conduct the developmental screening, such as the Ages and Stages questionnaire, hearing screenings, developmental screenings in general. And my interests are being outdoors, just being in nature. I do a lot of running with my dogs and family. I also like going to concerts, like music venues and that sort of thing. And my most favorite is building Legos with my nephew. And so I always look forward to building some Legos. And that's me. So nice seeing everyone. And I'll hand it off to, I believe, Kellie.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Kellie Begaye, and I am also Diné, and I am from Kaibito, Arizona, a small community near Page Lake Powell. Is a London Nishlan, Twitchitni, Bushishchin, Tachitni, Dashiche, Tubaha, Dashanale. And so I am the community outreach specialist for Navajo Project iLaunch. So majority of my duties are to kind of go out in the community and get resources out to community members and get together with folks and plan events. So right now we're in our outreach series where we identified 11 small communities throughout the Navajo Nation. And so we're working with other programs across the Navajo Nation and also the state of Arizona and New Mexico and Utah to bring resources to those communities. And it's been going great. So we're definitely appreciative of the collaborative efforts of everyone. And so I like a lot of traveling. I love traveling. Music is a big part of my life. Our family is kind of a music family. So I played the tenor saxophone and a little bit of the guitar and was part of my dad's band for a little bit. And I also love waterfalls, mountains, and winter is my favorite season. Thank you so much. And I will pass it to Charnielle.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Charnielle Desiderio. She'e nanasteja tachini nishlant katnesahni bashishchin twadik ojan dashache kia ani dashanella akot edna asana nishle. So I just introduced myself and my clans, and this is the way I introduce myself as a Navajo woman. I too work with the Navajo Project iLaunch, and I am the principal social service representative. So part of my role with this program is really helping to improve collaborations with programs and organizations in early childhood, reducing silos, and then also integrating behavioral health into primary care settings. A little bit about myself. I am a student, and then also what I like to do as far as my hobbies and my interests is gardening. As you can see, I also enjoy walking, running, reading, which I haven't really done for pleasure lately. It's mostly for school. But I also enjoy hiking, and hiking mostly in like the Southwest region, mostly like in Sedona area, or even in Durango. That's where I graduated from college. So that's a little bit about myself, and then I will pass it on to Cristina, I believe.
Thank you so much, Charnielle. So I just want to kind of, this is our transition slide. So we're going to be talking today about positive Indigenous parenting using the analogy of a Four Sisters garden. And this is a picture of one of my children in my mom's garden a few years ago up north. Could we go to the next slide, please? So we just wanted to ground our presentation before we really dive in. And knowing that these topics can be challenging at times to talk about, and making sure that we approach them in a very respectful way and an appropriate way. So I really love this quote here, and I think we as a team love this quote. And it says, if we carry intergenerational trauma, and we do, then we also carry intergenerational wisdom. It's in our genes and in our DNA. And so I think that's something that also really helped ground us in preparing for this presentation. And it's something that helps ground me as a parent as well. So our intentions and our overview for our presentation, again, is to present positive Indigenous parenting using the analogy of a Four Sisters garden. We want to connect with ancestral and traditional knowledge and just really center ourselves in knowing that our children are sacred. As part of this process, we want to connect with our cultural wisdom. Something that I truly believe is that our Indigenous cultures are health protective and health promotive. We know that we've had a lot of challenges, which were very intentional through colonization, that have harmed our Indigenous knowledge systems and the way that we have parented our children as a community and in our direct families. So when we approach this presentation and when we approach parenting, we think about planning and prayer and positive intentions. So coming to this conversation and coming to our children in a good way, we want to center Indigenous ways of teaching, of learning, and of nurturing our children and future generations. And then also respecting cultural and individual differences. I know that we have people from many different areas on this webinar and that may be seeing this webinar. So being respectful of the differences and individual preferences as well. And so when I think of these topics that I just mentioned, I really think about the concept of Indigenous survivance. And so we have a lot of these academic terms or fancy terms that really just represent the things that we experience and that we see in our Indigenous communities. And so really, although we're going to acknowledge some really difficult things in this presentation, we really want to ground in the strengths and the positives that we see in our communities who have overcome and survived so much. So just taking a moment to realize that some of the things that we're going to talk about can be challenging and may be triggering for some people. So we also encourage you to take care of yourself the way that is best for you during this time. All right. And I will pass off to Charnielle.
Thank you, Cristina. Thank you for giving us an overview of the presentation and the intent that comes with nurturing a positive environment for a child. So as Cristina mentioned, we're going to be using the analogy of the three sisters. So with that comes planting and gardening, and just, with that, like creating a positive environment as far as the positive intent that comes with it in prayer, in songs, and then also planning and connecting with our ancestral and traditional ways. So if I could have the next slide, please. So with this analogy, we really wanted to focus on the roots and the seeds and the connection to land and laying down that foundation, and then also the connection to elements and that support. So the connection to land is really just looking and, having that respect for Mother Earth, in that she is a teacher to us. And, there are examples of nature that show us that, we should be getting along, cooperating, and also endured hardship, adapting to change, and looking at it in a way like adapting to like weather conditions, drought, things like that. As far as traditional stories, I know with many Indigenous tribes, traditional stories are deeply rooted in Indigenous teachings, and that many lessons are in storytelling, and that storytelling instills teachings to our younger generations. And it also brings generations together. So you have your grandparents, parents, children, and young children all together in one room hearing these stories. And it provides a foundation for successful teaching and also parenting. It's essential for growth and for development and well-being. And with that, customs, values, and practices were handed down from generation to generation. In terms of the knowledge of land, with many Indigenous tribes, there is a connection and a relationship to land. So recognizing that as well. Traditional songs and prayers for planting and harvest. So with that, everything, and I know with most Indigenous tribes, everything starts with prayer. Everything begins with prayer. And with that, like with ceremonies or with celebrations or even with planting, I know for Dene, we have planting songs. So when we're breaking the ground, there are songs for those times and that moment, and hoping that, our crops will grow and be able to feed and nourish our families. With the season, the changing of the seasons with fall, winter, spring, and summer, with each season or with each month, it indicates a new teaching and a set of action that needs to be carried out. Winter stories, planting, harvesting, or preparing for winter. And then also with seeds, saving seeds to pass down through generations, which also connects us to those before us as well. And looking in the connection to elements and looking at it through support, it provides support to the seed, the plant, and the ecosystem, in that everything is interconnected. With Mother Earth and with Father Sky, Mother Earth represents the female side, and also with Father Sky, it represents the male side. Planting and gardening contributes to a healthier environment, and it also is interdependent, as I've mentioned before, and everything has a purpose. With Father Sky, as I mentioned, it does represent the male side, and it produces oxygen, it cleanses the air that we breathe. And then also with the elements, water is an important element of support in, planting and gardening. Rainwater is best for your plants and your garden. So these elements, all things have a purpose and must be respected. So this is how we wanted to lay the foundation before we get more into our conversation with the three sisters, and providing that concept of a positive, nurturing environment. So before I hand it off to Kim, I just wanted to know if there were any questions in the chat. If not, I will hand it over to Kim. Thank you.
We don't have any messages in the chat right now.
Thank you, Charnielle. And if we can go to the next slide, please. And like Charnielle mentioned, laying that foundation and having those good intentions with prayer, with good thoughts, good teachings, and the teachings being passed down. So that really gives the good soil needed for growth. And so utilizing the three sisters, we created an analogy to portray that for families. And how do we raise children? And so with the three sisters teaching, it's with the corn, beans, and squash being the three sisters. It originated from our Indigenous ancestors. They were the agriculturalists that brought this teaching forth. And when planting all three together, it creates a beneficial relationship between the three plants. And each plants help each other grow. And this is a form of companion planting. And its relation with one another extends beyond planting, but also serves as superfoods when consumed together and prayed for and celebrated. So in the teachings, it said they should be planted together, eaten together, and celebrated together. And so in breaking this down and using that metaphor into how we're raising our children, how we're going to represent it in today's presentation is that corn represents the children, the corn stalk being the caregivers and parents. And so you can see the stalk helps provide or helps the vines of the beans grow. And then the beans are the extended families. It could be our grandparents, aunts, uncles, anybody that we identify as family. And then the beans provides the roots, nutrients to the corn and the squash representing the community. So this provides the shade to protect the roots and to hold moisture into the soil. And then the corn, when the corn, beans, and squash grow together, they grow stronger together than if they were to be grown individually. And it takes a little bit more time, effort, and a lot of more input to grow them individually than if they were to grow together. And so this really represents the importance of traditional kinship, how we need more than just the nuclear family. In Western teachings, a lot of the times, it really just, when you're talking about family, it's really that nuclear family. But in our Indigenous teachings, family is extended beyond that nuclear mom, dad, brother, sister. It goes to our grandparents, to our communities, even as a nation, as a tribe. And I'm going to have Cristina expand on this a little bit more.
Thanks, Kim. So I wanted to just share a little bit of a parent perspective on this idea of three sisters, the importance of parents and caregivers, extended family, and community. A lot of times we are taught in our kind of mainstream society that children are the responsibility of the parents. But I think, traditionally and ethically, the well-being of children is everyone's responsibility, and we have an accountability to one another to have a healthy environment to raise our children. Now, not all of us have been raised in a healthy environment. When I look at this example, to me, it's a beautiful example, but we may not all have the different parts of our three sisters garden. And so I think one area that we can support each other in and support parents is kind of, curating or cultivating these relationships and supporting one another so that we're able to provide support for parents and caregivers, for extended family and for community. And parents that may look at this slide or hear this topic and think that they're missing an area of that, I also want to remind us that that's something that we can create for ourselves and for our children. So we might not have all the tools or all the parts, at this moment in time, or we may not come with all of the pieces, but these are things that we can cultivate for ourselves and for our children. So I think getting back to our mindset that it takes all of us to support the well-being of our children and our future generations. Thank you. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Cristina. And then also, there's also a fourth sister, depending in your region or your teachings, your tribe. The fourth sister can be tobacco, sunflower, or bee balm. And what we connected this analogy with, there was the environment, because the fourth sister really protects and supports the beans, corns, and squash all together, and then also lure away birds from the corn, and then also attracts insects to pollinate as well. And so we saw this as the ecosystem, the Mother Earth and Father Sky, the representation there, and how it oversees that whole system of family, that support that Cristina was talking about, and it being including Mother Earth, Father Sky, and the ecosystem. And then Cristina, I don't know if you want to expand on this a little bit more.
Thank you, Kim. And looking at the fourth system and the environment, we know that the environment that we raise our children in is very important. We talk about social determinants of health and how those impact health and well-being. And these are things, our environment is something that we may have. There might be aspects in our environment that we're not able to change. But I think that awareness of the importance of our environment can help us support our children in the ways that they need. And it can also help us support ourselves in the way that we need it as well. Thank you. We can go to the next slide.
All righty, thank you, Cristina. So when we think about raising our little ones and creating that environment that Kim and Cristina shared, we really want to think about the stress that's involved in our everyday lives. You know, we have the corn, the beans, and squash. And just to take that metaphor a little bit further, we want to think about what is affecting, how are we going to create and cultivate a healthy garden? How are we going to really, you know, make sure that our children are growing into successful adults? And so when we think about that, we think about stress. You know, we all have everyday stressors. But first of all, what is stress? And so basically, stress is the body's natural defense system against danger, challenges, predators. And so really thinking about what stress is. And so we have these 3 types of stress. And so the main thing when we think about stress is we have to think about the fight or flight or freeze. And so if we're going to fight the potential predator, if we're going to freeze up, or if we're going to run away from it. And so to take this into consideration for positive stress could be, as a parent or caregiver, oh, I forgot to make dinner. What am I going to make dinner for my children? And so that gets you going. You know, it increases your thoughts process. It increases like your blood pressure. It increases muscle preparedness. And so just thinking about that, it gets you going, you know, okay, it's 7:30. I need to start making dinner right here, right now. I don't know what I'm going to make, but I just need to make something. So that's kind of what positive stress is. And so just thinking about that and thinking in relation to our children, you know, really thinking about what they're going through and them thinking about, oh, am I going to eat tonight? And that sudden thought and that increase in their senses. Am I going to eat? My mom didn't make me anything. My parents didn't cook dinner. And so that's kind of that reaction to positive stress. And then we move on to tolerable stress. If the parent or caregiver is out of a job for a month, you know, it doesn't turn into just dinner. It turns into, okay, breakfast, lunch, dinner for several days, maybe even weeks. And so it's a recurring stressor in the parent and the child's lives. And so that is also known as chronic stress. And so we think about this as, you know, just it happening a lot. And it could also be us as parents or caregivers, if our routines are too jam-packed, you know, we're taking too much on for ourselves and really not giving ourselves the opportunity to breathe and relax. And then we move on to toxic stress. What happens if both parents are out of work and we lose our home? And so that toxic stress on ourselves and our children. And then that's where we really want to talk about the adversities and when it turns into an adverse childhood experience and when our garden is not flourishing as much as we want it to. And so if we could go on to the next slide. And so when it turns into that toxic stress and that adversity, it could really damage our garden. It could damage our children. It could damage us as parents and caregivers. It could damage our extended family. And then it could also damage the environment that we're in, you know, our communities. And so some adverse childhood experiences could be physical abuse, neglect, and that could also be bad soil if we want to put it into the terms of the garden, you know, the bad soil. If our garden can't flourish, if there's constant physical and mental abuse in the home or in the community. There's family incarceration, thinking of it as birds, you know, if there's constant family incarceration, you know, the birds are going to get to our plants. The birds are going to start to pick holes in our leaves in our garden. Also natural disasters, you know, thinking about the natural disasters that happen throughout our communities. And then substance use could also be the pest, you know, a big thing that we have are groundhogs in Arizona. And so just constantly pestering our garden. And then also domestic violence or undiagnosed mental illness could be the bugs, the insects that try to get in. And then the biggest one is that us as Indigenous people all deal with is historical trauma, you know, that constant beaming of sunlight if we're not properly protecting our garden. It dries out our plants, it dries us out, and it's just constant. And so just really thinking about that. But all of these things could be resolved if we have healthy, nurturing relationships and really having these supports and services for our families and for our children, and really making sure that our communities do have those services and that they know the resources that are out there. So thinking about, you know, if we're out there in our garden every other day, taking care of these things, noticing that our soil needs some nutrients, or noticing that there's groundhogs that are starting to come around, you know, we're able to stop it before it gets too bad, to where it totally ruins our garden, to where it totally detriments our children. And so really thinking about how we can really start to develop those nurturing relationships if we don't have them as of right now, and how we can start working on our garden, working on ourselves, working on our family and our household. And so if you could click the link to kind of show a quick video. Thank you.
Bear with me just a minute. We're just getting the screen switched over.
We all want to give our children what they need to grow to their full potential. And as parents, we play an important role in their development. But our parenting is affected by the supports and challenges in our lives, including experiences that cause what's known as toxic stress. Stress is called toxic when it doesn't let up, and there aren't supportive relationships to help us cope. That can make it hard to get through the day, let alone be the best caregivers we can be. The overwhelming burden of toxic stress can affect the health and well-being of adults. It can also affect the development of children in ways that can last a lifetime. Stress that puts us in a constant state of fight or flight can make it feel like we're always on edge, or like it's impossible to calm down. And these feelings can overload our ability to provide the supportive relationships that children need in order to thrive. Think of toxic stress as heavy cargo. Just as a truck can only haul so much weight before it stops moving forward, challenging life circumstances like losing a job or not having a place to live can weigh us down. And just as a truck can break down if it carries too much for too long, we too can wear down from being overburdened without the support we need. When toxic stress is related to things we can't control, like poverty, abuse, or racism, It can feel especially heavy to take on. But experiencing toxic stress doesn't have to determine who we are or how we act. And understanding how stress affects us can empower us to make change in our lives. There are things we can do to buffer ourselves and our children against the effects of even the most intense stress. Just as redistributing cargo from an overloaded truck can help it run again. Supports and services, things like food pantries, job training programs, or even just talking with someone who cares, can help us focus on caring for ourselves and our children. And just as regular maintenance is required to keep a truck running, reliable access to community services can help us manage the load during challenging times. Reaching out to get support can be difficult, but things that might seem very small, like sitting and breathing deeply, playing I Spy with your child, or even sharing a walk or a snuggle can make a difference. Over time, these small steps can build our resilience and our children's by strengthening the skills and relationships that help us cope. And our communities can build resilience too by providing services and opportunities to help all families thrive. Supports like these help build a strong foundation for developing brain architecture. So the earlier we can provide them, the better. But the brain is capable of change throughout life, and it's never too late for a tune-up. Coping with and healing from toxic stress takes a lot of effort and support. But we all need the help of others in difficult times. And building resilience and strength in our families and communities is one of the most important investments we can make as a society. In the end, it will help all of us become the parents that we want to be.
All right, thank you for sharing that video. If we go back to the PowerPoint. Alrighty, thank you. And so when we think about that video, I'm thinking about the children and our garden and the community. We know that we're all going to go through stressors throughout our lives. We know that as children, they're going to go through certain types of stress. As adults, we're going to go through certain types of stress. But we really want to make sure that it does not get to that part where it becomes toxic stress. And so we think about providing a safe place for our families, for our little ones, for ourselves. But we as adults know that we're not always in a safe place. We're not always in a safe situation. And so we need to also create a brave space, a brave space for ourselves, for our little ones to know that it's okay to be brave to reach out. It's okay to be brave enough to ask for help. It's okay to be brave to know that we're going through a hard time and to really start to develop healthy coping skills. And so just thinking of not just a safe space, but also creating a brave space to know that it's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to, have a bad day. It's okay to label our emotions. And so really thinking about how we can create that safe place and that brave space for our little ones at an early age. And knowing that there's always room for change. There's always a time and a place. And so just thinking about that and thinking about how we can really focus on those positives and those nurturing relationships. So I'll give it to Kellie, and I see a hand up before I hand it off to Kellie. Okay. All right. Go ahead, Kellie.
All right, thank you, Amanda. Can we go to the next slide, please? All right, so moving on from adverse childhood experiences, we want to move towards talking about positive childhood experiences. So what positive childhood experiences are experiences in childhood that build a child's sense of belongingness and connection. They also help buffer the negative effects of adverse childhood experiences, meaning that even if a child has experienced hard things, challenging things like witnessing domestic violence, being bullied, losing a parent, or even abuse, experiencing positive childhood experiences can protect children from developing long-term negative effects from these types of trauma. So the more positive experiences a child has, the more likely they will become healthy and resilient. Next slide. So when we talk about PACEs, young children experience the world through their relationships with parents and their caregivers and other caregivers. And children and families thrive when they have access to safe, stable, and nurturing relationships and environments. So how do we create that safe and nurturing environment to be able to build those relationships? So these type of experiences has the most healing effects on things that cannot be brought on or necessarily cost a lot of money. They're experiences that help children learn to trust others, even if life seems uncertain, difficult, or frightening. They can happen when we're willing to talk honestly about things that are hard to understand, scary, embarrassing, or painful. So when adults are willing to have these types of conversations with their children, the result is that children feel reassured that they are not alone in their struggles and that they are better able to find meaning or purpose in their struggles. So how can we help nurture or support these PACEs? One, we don't want to assume that a child is doing fine just because he or she is not showing obvious signs of distress. Check in, ask them to share their thoughts, their feelings, their concerns about what might be going on. If a child gives superficial responses like, oh, I'm fine, share some of your own thoughts, feelings, and concerns to show that it is acceptable to talk openly about these things. Just like Amanda mentioned, creating that safe and brave space so that they feel comfortable enough to bring up any challenges that they may be facing. So showing concern and being open can help create an environment where a child can feel like they're able to talk to family about their feelings, also that their family stood by them during very difficult times. And some of the ways that we can create this environment is listening carefully, put down the electronics and give them your full attention. Some children are not comfortable maintaining eye contact when talking about challenging situations or challenging emotions they may be facing. So they're sometimes more likely to bring up these emotions during times where they don't have to look directly at you, maybe like riding in the car with you. So don't dismiss the topic because it's not a good time. Make time, even if it means you have to drive extra laps around a block to do so. Offer compassion and empathy rather than solutions. Many of us are uncomfortable hearing another person's fears or even our children's, but if we can understand the situation and listen fully, we can show that we are in a position to be able to help provide some compassion and empathy. Also, let your child's questions guide you. They'll let you know what's on their mind or when they do and what concerns them the most. A great way to start a conversation with them may be asking a question like, hey, what questions do you have about what is happening? And then say words. Don't assume that they know you care. We all like to hear that we're loved. We all like to hear that we did a good job, that somebody is proud of us, so we want to pass it along to our children as well. Take every opportunity to show them and tell them how you feel about them and that you're proud of an accomplishment, that they did something well. And then how do we encourage participating in community traditions? Just because we're in the same room doesn't mean that this is not the same as connecting. So do something together, play a game, crafts, look at pictures, share memories. Do some volunteer work in the community. I know a lot of the communities across our great Navajo Nation, there's like trash pickup that goes on. So, involving yourself and your child in activities like that, or volunteering at the local animal shelter, maybe sporting clubs or music or art societies, religious organizations. This can help create a sense of belonging to a place and a community. It offers opportunities to learn about getting along with others. It can also, give them options for people to go to when they need help, and also create a network they can use to learn about different jobs, skills. And so this can help create that strong social connections that can also boost their confidence and also lead to new friendships. And so, one of the other things is, creating that sense of belonging or helping in that process for your child, whether that belonging is in school or even among their friends. So, we can help do this by encouraging a child's interests such as sports, music, drama, cultural clubs, being respectful and accepting of diversity, encouraging positive and caring relationships. And we can help do this by finding out what clubs, youth groups, sports, or school holiday programs that they can join. Also, maybe getting with other parents and sharing resources with each other. Maybe also participating in sharing transport responsibilities. Also, finding out what your child is interested in, and maybe things like skateboarding, photography, cycling, and how can we help them continue to enjoy those activities. And then also maybe encouraging your child or maybe even your teen to invite friends over to watch films or play video games, if your home situation allows, of course. And so, how do we help support and nurture friendships that your children may have? Talk about the value of honesty, encouraging to make friends with people they can trust and be honest with, and talk to them about what a good friend will do or how they will make them feel. Someone is a good friend that can make them feel relaxed and able to be themselves, telling them the truth and listen without judgment. Someone that won't pressure them, blame them, or make them feel anxious. And also highlighting good qualities in their peers or their friends. When you see a friend or their peer doing something positive, talk about it with your child, explain why you admire this kind of behavior, and also talk about other qualities that might help build strong friendships and connections as well. And so we can be, active listeners and have some understanding to the situations or the emotions that our children may be feeling. Talk to them about trusting and keeping confidence, of course, with some healthy limits and boundaries, and being supportive and being respectful. And then talking about socializing, having a good chat with them, encouraging to maybe like go take lunch with a friend or lunch with a mentor that they have, or even with their parent. They open up during a certain activity or physical activity, encourage that activity, and continue to do things that kind of help nurture and strengthen that bond. And then also maybe talk about your friendships. What are some of the experiences you've had, both negative and positive, and what are the things that you've learned from them, and how can you incorporate that into helping them build supportive and strong, healthy relationships with their friends. And then also, so having at least 2 non-parent adults who take a genuine interest in your child. This could come in the form of maybe teachers that they have a good bond with at school, coaches, extended family, aunts, uncles, a grandparent, maybe even neighbors. And to help your child feel safe around people in the community, you can talk with the adults in their lives that they trust and share contact information, information about your children, what activities that they do, and just encourage also your child to tell you if there's any new contacts with adults in their community or school as well. And then how do we create and nurture a safe and protective environment at home? Some of the things that we can do is not yelling, take a moment to think, and think about what we say before we say it and how we say it. Let them be kids, read to them, do crafts with them, set good examples. You know, if you want your child to be to behave a certain way, to use certain words, you have to be that role model and exemplify that as well. Stay positive, be consistent, be honest and straightforward, and display affection. Next slide, please. So more ways that we can encourage and support PACEs. Supporting during difficult times. Family meetings are a great way to kind of set expectations for your kids with regards to maybe roles and limits, any rules there may be in the household, but also it's a great time to provide some encouragement to create that, you know, as Amanda mentioned, that safe and brave space for folks to feel comfortable to open up about any challenges that they may be facing. And then also reassuring your children, letting them know that they can come to you, they can go to their friends if they feel comfortable, or that other important adults in their life. And then having some resources for extra support as well. So that might be maybe resources for activities, for groups, even for challenging situations. If there's a need for like counseling, I know that some programs have like ways to express them, have children ways to express themselves through like app if they're not wanting to do a phone call or through chat. Also participating in the community, again, community events, you know, volunteer work, picking up trash, going to fairs. I know a lot of communities are kind of opening and kind of laxing on some of the guidelines, but, you know, keeping in guidance with whatever ordinances your tribe or your state is putting in place for these events. And then play is a child's language. So encourage outside play, exercise. If there's an outside activity that you can join in on, even better. Going to the gym or maybe doing some Zumba classes online. I know that some of our communities here in the Navajo Nation have virtual Zumba. So those are some great activities to share. And limiting screen time. So maybe put a daily limit on TV or games or the internet. And then also having some options for them. So instead of no TV, you know, let's do this activity, let's do this craft, let's get outside and do this. And then having play kits ready available could be a huge help as well. Next slide. And sharing feelings, you know, there are a lot of different ways that we can, as a family, share feelings lists. They have emotional wheels that you can sit with your child and have them identify what they're feeling. And again, having some support in place, having some options in place, and creating that space for them to be able to have that openness to talk to you and have that conversation about what they're feeling and why they may be feeling a certain way. Using a flipboard and having them write or draw what they may be feeling. And again, going back to technology, some of the teenagers may be more into apps. So there's some emotions apps out there that your family can use. And then sense of belongings, feeling supported and feeling safe. So, you know, example what healthy relationships should look like within the family, with the friends, with other support systems, with the community. And then also having resources for peer support groups. Again, you know, what are some of the resources available in your community or on apps that might be appropriate for them and whatever challenge that they are facing. And then encouraging a healthy and positive relationship with their two non-parent adults. You know, if they want to go and do an activity, if they want to go, you know, hang out somewhere, being supportive of that again, but also having conversation about what healthy boundaries look like. And then also creating a safe space in the home with caretakers. You know, if the family is going through a challenging situation, being able to reach out, not only yourself, your children, but as a family unit to help provide some supportive services for whatever challenging situations that the family may be going through. So, you know, we talked about adverse childhood experiences, you know, but you know, it's not the be all end all. There are ways that we can kind of address some of those hard and challenging experiences that our children go through so that we can kind of provide that journey to healing and journey to a positive parenting journey for ourselves as well. So I'd like to give it over to Cristina to kind of provide a parent perspective on PACEs.
Thank you, Kelly. I think as a parent, I remember learning about ACEs the first time. And in that conversation, it was a really heavy conversation. I calculated my ACE score at that time, and I felt almost like hopeless. I learned about how ACEs can affect like not only my health in the future, but the health of future generations, my kids and their kids. And it just felt really, really hard. I didn't know what to do with that information. And so I think when we can learn about PACEs, we may not be able to change the things that we have gone through already or our children have gone through, but we can do those positive supports that support our best outcome. And I think of PACEs like as buffers for the challenges and the difficulties that we may have gone through or our children may have gone through. And so I feel like as a parent, learning this was really hard, but it also helped to learn about PACEs that I wasn't powerless. There's things that I could do to support my children and support their wellness. And learning about ACEs and PACEs, acknowledging that I couldn't change the things that I had experienced as a child or that some of my children had already experienced. But learning about them now, you can take action about it and support their wellness through PACEs, or at least having conversations with them about ACEs and how those might have affected them. So I think about some of these strategies, and to me as a parent, I find these really helpful. Sometimes we talk about concepts and then we think like, what do we do with it now? And so going through some of these things and having done some of these things as a family, and like teaching my kids about feelings and having them acknowledge their feelings. And then me as a parent actually like taking the time to understand where they're coming from and their feelings. And I think that really opens up dialogue, between us as a parent and child. And just having that open communication, talking about the difficulties that we've been through as a family, and then how we can work together as a family, to be healthier individually and together. So I think the PACEs aspect is something that's really important and that we should always include when we talk about ACEs. And I look at some of these PACEs and I think about how many of these things are already kind of like inherent to our Indigenous cultures and in our Indigenous communities. So some of these, may be new, we may be learning about them for the first time. And some of these are already present and we can kind of build upon them to support our children. Thank you. Next slide.
Okay, so this is just an illustration and kind of relating back to what we started with the three sisters. So we talk about adequate sunlight. We talked about too much sunlight being the historical trauma. So adequate sunlight, how do we break that generational historical trauma? What are some things we can help to address that, not only as individuals, but within our families and also within the community? So even with the program, our programs and the services that we provide, how do we provide services that are not only trauma informed, but culturally sensitive to our audience and those that we work with? And then we talked about pollination, having good pollination. Parenting begins before conception. So it's, referring to even prior to conception, having, those conversations with potential mates and, having a good partner that's going to be a good life partner and, be that good father figure, mother figure role for our children. And then moisture for growth. So that comes in the form of parent support, parent engagement. So we talked about ways that we can help nurture and encourage those positive childhood experiences, and also knowing what resources are available to us. And then prayer, prayer can go a long way with not only individually, but within our families, our communities, as a people, praying for protection, harmony, growth, safety, wellness, and strength. And then having that good soil. So that good soil comes in the form of the community. We've talked a few times throughout the presentation about how it takes a community, a strong community and a strong village to, nurture our children. So coming together and supporting that, even the cultural significance of extended family, being involved in that process of raising and teaching our children, and incorporating culture, history, talking about our history, traditions, our language into our family, into ourselves, instilling them in ourselves as well. And then family, a lot of our cultural teachings, again, incorporate extended family into how we nurture and how it applies to our parenting journey. And then school, encouraging our children to do well in school, and how do we continue to support their efforts in school and being a good example ourselves for our family. So this is just a quick explanation of this diagram, and I believe Cristina is next. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelly. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. So I think, thinking about our Three Sisters Garden, our Four Sisters Garden, and parenting our children, some things that are important for us to think about and some practical strategies that can help us is that it's really important to support our own healing and wellness. We've acknowledged the impact of historical trauma. There's also intergenerational trauma. For myself as a parent, this is something that I had to address, was my own healing, so I could support the well-being of my children. And this can be really hard to do. I think this is where the importance of your own support system and your own community can come in as well. And so it can be really challenging to go through this process, but it's really important as well, so we can break some of these cycles and support the best environment for our own children. I think that takes me to the next one, is finding mentors and role models. So we may not know off the bat how to be a good parent. I didn't really know how to parent as a 17-year-old with a newborn. But it was the importance of mentors and role models and people that understood me and understood my context that really helped me then and continue to help me now. Parenting classes and learning opportunities like the webinar right now. iLaunch has a series of classes called Positive Dene Parenting that can be helpful to people. And so taking advantage of those opportunities in your community or in the local school system or wherever that may be. And cultural teachings. I believe our culture is wellness and can support us and our children, in all areas and all stages of life. And working together to build our community. So community is so important. And I think investment in community also gives our kids that sense of purpose and that sense of belonging that is also very important. Being present physically and mentally can be a practice. This can be something that's challenging. How many times as parents are we multitasking and we're thinking about work and we're trying to cook and we're trying to listen? And so as best as we're able to be present with our children physically and mentally. And then also having intention and reflection. Things get really busy and sometimes it helps to stop and think about what kind of parent do I want to be? Reflecting on our parenting, reflecting on our relationships with our children. And then being role models ourselves. It's important for us to have role models, but remembering that as parents, we are role models for our children. That doesn't mean that we have to be perfect. There's no such thing as a perfect parent, but realizing the impact that we have on our children. So modeling the behaviors that we want to see in them as well. And supporting our children in what's important to them. So what's important to them may not be what's most important to us. It might not be our specific interest, but listening to them and having them know that what's important to them is also important to us. So this could be their hobbies, this could be their value systems, this could be, certain things with school. And then supporting others along the way. As we go in this journey of parenting and this journey of our own healing and our own wellness, as we progress, we can help others. So again, it's not us individually alone, it's all of us together. Next slide, please. So just as we can build a strong garden, we can also build our parenting and family and community support. And this is true no matter where in life we're at and no matter what experiences that we've had in our own lives. And we can learn the tools to parent our children in a positive way. So as a parent, I can honestly say I was a very different parent at 17 than I am now, sometime later. And, you know, having 5 children along the way. And so I like to think, and I hope to think that I'm a better parent now because of some of the things that we've talked about in this webinar. Again, I'm not a perfect parent by any means. We're still learning, we're still growing as a family. But really because of the support that we've had along the way. We can acknowledge the impacts of ACEs and focus on PACEs. And I think I touched on this just a bit. You know, learning about ACEs can be really traumatic. We may have gone through things in our own lives that are really harmful and hurtful. Our children may have experienced those things as well. And so I think healing from that, you know, we may have guilt, there may be anger, there may be pain, but supporting that healing process in ourselves so that we can support healing processes in our children and healthy relationships in our homes and our communities. So we can work together to address and heal from our own trauma and support the well-being of our children and the well-being of our communities. And really just coming back to, you know, we might have some of these resources already, or we might need to create them. So again, for my own self, you know, being a single mother, being a young mom, I am a domestic violence survivor, and I didn't have a lot of these tools. You know, it was like really learning along the way, taking parenting classes, connecting with other really supportive women, having almost like a network of supporting people in our life that really can help us, and taking advantages like of the resources that we have while creating a support system and network for our family. And so supporting kinship for my children has been, I think, really helpful and healthy for them. And so our children and our future generations are really the fruits of our garden. It's why we're here today. And they enable the continuing of ourselves and our ancestors and our communities. And some of us might have very close connection to our ancestral teachings and to our elders, and some of us may not. So we do the best we can with what we have. And we can, like we said, cultivate our garden as we go and build the best environment for our children, ourselves, and our communities. So next slide, please. So I just want to thank you all for spending a good portion of your afternoon with us. And I think just thinking about this analogy of our children as the fruits of our garden, all the necessary pieces that can come together to support their well-being. And really, when we're supporting our children's well-being and our future generations' well-being, we're supporting all of our well-being as well. So I want to also thank the iLaunch team for being here with us today, this afternoon. And does anyone have any questions? And we can go ahead and go to the next slide. We have some resources. So we also wanted to share some resources that may be helpful. So there's the organization Prevent Child Abuse Arizona, Center for Child Counseling, Idaho Youth Ranch, but also acknowledging the cultural knowledge keepers in each of our communities as important resources in this journey of parenting. And I'd like to hand back to the iLaunch team for any closing comments.
Thank you, Cristina, for inviting us to co-present with you and to put this together. We were thinking about how could we best relay the message, and I think it was Charnielle from our team was like, what about the Three Sisters teaching and how the beans, corn, and squash grow together and really help one another out and create that really nurturing environment to help one another grow. And then we were like, okay, then we went off of that. But it was really neat and fun to come together with Cristina and put together this presentation and then also carry out the the things that we shared with you today with the parenting classes that Cristina mentioned. We provide the positive dinner parenting classes that's focused for Navajo families and children. And we utilize the positive Indian parenting curriculum that was created by the National Indian Child Welfare Association, NICWA. And we encourage others, if you have the funds, to also have facilitators take that training and be a facilitator. We've had parents, caregivers that taken the courses throughout. It wasn't just within the Navajo Nation. We've had participants from Canada, from Maine, from California, from Utah, from all over, wanting to know more about these teachings, and then also resources and being that connection. So we need more of us, people like Cristina and the iLaunch team. We need more of you all to also be those facilitators and those knowledge keepers, sharing with your communities as well. So I don't know if anyone from the iLaunch team has anything else to add, Kellie, Charnielle, or Amanda.
So I wanted to say thank you all for joining us, and definitely thank you, Cristina and Redwind Consulting, for inviting Navajo Project iLaunch. We do have a Facebook page, it's Navajo Project iLaunch, where we share a lot of resources. We do hold a Navajo Nation Early Childhood speaker series once a month, and that's where we talk about different topics, such as this month, actually tomorrow, will be on nutrition and early childhood. And last month, I believe, was the importance of the father perspective and the mother perspective when it comes to parenting. And then we have even a speaker series on, I guess, birthing traditions related to Navajo culture. And then we have a lot of great guest presenters. And so you can check that out on Navajo Project iLaunch on Facebook. And we also have a lot of great resources. And yeah, so go ahead and check that out. And thank you again.
Well, thank you, everyone. Before we end the session, I just want to let you know that there will be an evaluation popping up once Zoom closes. We'd love to hear what you thought, so if you're able to fill that out, we'd very much so appreciate it. We do have an upcoming webinar for Indigenous mindfulness as an intervention tool for Native American youth on May 19th at 1 p.m. Mountain Time. As a reminder, this webinar was recorded and will be uploaded onto Redwind's YouTube channel within the next few days. You can also find previous recordings there. In closing, I want to thank all of our presenters, Cristina, Amanda, Kim, Kellie, Charnielle. I'd like to thank our captioner, and I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you all stay safe, and I hope to see you at the next webinar.